So we have a very special guest with us today. I've been pretty excited about this one, as you can tell by my background. So I want to get right to it. Trans-American Aquaculture. All right, let's bring him in. Adam Thomas, CEO of TAA. Adam, welcome to Buffalo Fireside Chats. How you doing?
Good, Eric. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Now you're a Buffalo native, correct? Like you
I
were.
am. Yep. I'm born in Buffalo. Family's from Buffalo and in the surrounding area. So yeah, I've spent a lot of time up in the Buffalo area, and we get back to Bills games as often as we can. So yeah, still tied to Buffalo.
That is awesome. Do you have a favorite wing joint?
So I don't actually. You just give me anything that's deep fried with buffalo sauce on it, I'm gonna be a pretty happy camper. But no, it was funny because my dad was actually talking. He wants to come up to a Bills game this year, and he wants to hit Ted's, Schwabbles, and Duff's downtown. So looks like we'll have a packed agenda when we come up for a game this later this year.
That's awesome. Maybe we could connect and grab some wings together. And you know what? Believe it or not, it's funny because deep fried shrimp, like bread them up, fry them, and shake them in buffalo wing sauce. It's a guilty pleasure. It is. So
I will bring some with me then. Be the proper time of the year. So
all right. Well, let's get right into it. I just want to acknowledge people in the chat. Nick Coriano is here. Nick, welcome to the program. So listen, before we dive in, all right, no pun intended. I had to. Tell us a little bit of the backstory of your journey and how you arrived at this venture into the shrimp market.
yeah, so I mean, I never thought in my wildest dreams, starting my career in banking that I'd ever wind up becoming a shrimp farmer. But it's an ironic turn of events. So I started my career. I went to college in Northwest Ohio, and then I moved down to Columbus, Ohio, right after graduation, and started to go work for JP Morgan. So I worked for JP Morgan in a variety of kind of entry level positions when I first got out of college, doing home lending, audit, kind of just getting familiar with kind of the whole business process. Eventually, I decided to go to grad school. And so post grad school, my first position within the bank was to run an offshore operations in the Philippines. So a lot of the work that the bank does, client facing stuff obviously is in front of the clients. A lot of the back office support stuff's done in international locations. So I was tasked with leading a group of about 400 people in the Philippines. So spent a year traveling back and forth between Columbus and the Philippines. And then the mortgage crisis happened. And so we had to I was still in home lending at that point in time. So we had to create a quality department to really go through and look at every single mortgage document that had ever been signed, make sure that the bank didn't have risk and exposure and things like that. So pretty much over the course of a couple months, we went from not having a department to having a 350 people strong department that I was leading up. And then, we went through that for about a year and a half. And then I had the opportunity to go to work for a consulting firm. So my background after grad school, I majored and I had an MBA, but I had a focus in finance as well. So I was always interested in kind of deal work, mergers and acquisitions. And I had the opportunity to go to work for a consulting firm that was focusing on more mergers and acquisitions, but in the mortgage space. So consolidating law firms, consolidating mortgage servicers, things like that. That position brought me down to Dallas, brought me to Texas, and was in that role for about 3 years. And as that was starting to wind down a little bit, that's when I met my wife. So here's the introduction to shrimp farming. My wife is Ecuadorian. She was born in Peru, but raised in Ecuador. And my father-in-law and my father-in-law's brother, my wife's uncle, are two of them pioneers of shrimp farming in Ecuador. And around the 2017 time, for those familiar with Ecuador, the business climate, political climate, kind of just overall general safety and concern. There's a lot of things going on in that country right now. So the family was looking to get investment money out of Ecuador and into a field and industry that they knew about. So my brother-in-law and my wife's cousin, who were the other two founding members along with myself, were at a conference in San Antonio, and they heard about this opportunity to look at a couple shrimp farms in the Rio Grande Valley, down around Rio Hondo, Harlingen, Brownsville area in Texas. And so I got involved because of my background in banking, my background in finance. And so they're like, hey, I know you don't know anything about shrimp farming. Why don't you come along? We'll be able to evaluate the deal better. So the culmination of kind of that research and visiting a few farms, we wound up purchasing the largest scale farm in the United States, the largest scale shrimp farm in the United States. There's only a few shrimp farms in the United States. There's one very big one in Texas, but in terms of land wise, our farm is the biggest. And to give kind of some context around just how big, it's 2.5 times the size of Central Park. So it's not a small tract of land. It's not a, something where you see like a lot of these. I'm sure you've seen like your local newspapers, like people buying pools from
Shrimp
Walmart,
pools,
throwing them
yeah.
in a storage shed, and throwing some aeration and growing shrimp. It's not like that. It's a very big tract of land. There's a lot of opportunity for us to develop that further and to
Wow.
really expand the operation. So that happened in mid 2017. And since that point in time, we've been really focusing on building the genetics, doing small trials, doing small harvest runs. I think one of the things you mentioned earlier, we were talking kind of backstage, was like the families. And we'll get into that a little bit more later on. But like we have been able, by having our own farm, we quickly realized that we needed to be able to control our own genetics. The genetic quality of animals throughout the United States was not all that great. It's getting better. But it wasn't all that great at the time. So we knew we needed to be able to control that part of the life cycle. And so we built our own genetics facilities on site. We have that readily available, and that helps us kind of, make sure that we're getting the quality animals and the quality genetics we need. So,
Wow.
so yeah, I mean, that's being born in Buffalo, not knowing what the heck I wanted to do in college, all of a sudden went to work for a bank, and here we are shrimp farming now.
And I gotta say, and that must have been really going back to the mortgage crisis, because that's remarkable. I didn't know that must have been a completely overwhelming experience. Like, holy crap, overwhelming.
I mean, it was pretty interesting. Like, at that point I was, relatively fresh out of grad school, had my first real big like operations assignment, but then having to build something from like the ground up where the department did not exist. In a multi-trillion-dollar bank, you did not have this department. I think a lot of banks didn't have that department. So it was something that a lot of people were doing, but we were able to be very successful very quickly. And you learn a lot when you get thrown in the trenches and you're working, 18-hour days to make sure that, the bank is not at risk and the customers are getting serviced.
I gotta say, Harold says